Good evening. I'm John Bailey. This is People to be Heard, the program where people who have something to say have their say. And tonight you've got the Superintendent of White Plains Schools, Dr. Paul Freed. Welcome to the program, Dr. Freed.
Thank you.
And the Assistant Superintendent for Business, Fred Seiler, has just completed his 10th budget for the City of White Plains School District, and Dr. Freed, is your first budget. And I would like to ask you, tell us about this first budget, which features the lowest tax increase on the taxpayer in 5 years, 1/3 of 1%. Tell us about the purpose.
Sure, I'm happy to talk about that. First, I do want to thank Fred Seiler as he completes his 10th year here. He'll be retiring from the White Plains City School District, and as you know, he's done a fantastic job for the school district all this time. So I appreciate all of his hard work and efforts.
And always answers every question factually, and this is much appreciated by the media.
Absolutely.
Right. And
so the first budget, again, with the collaboration of our teachers, administrators, our cabinet, and Fred, we've been able to put together, I think, a very responsible budget, adding important staffing to the school district, but at the same time making sure, of course, that we don't exceed the cap. And as you just mentioned a moment ago, it's the lowest tax increase in 5 years. So we're very, very pleased with that.
Right. And the budget is $208,750,000, and that's an increase of about
1.43%.
1.43%, and in dollars, how much is it?
Just under $3 million.
Just under $3 million. And now, one thing that has always made me curious about it is the budget always goes up a little bit, sometimes a lot. But my question is, how come we can never really cut the bond budget?
Well, I think that, we are in the people business, right?
Yes.
We are all about our children, and we need appropriate staffing in order to serve our students well. So as we continue to have a stable student population, we have the requirement of class size, of academic electives, meeting the Common Core curriculum. So it's important for us to maintain our staffing and to continue to serve our children well.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned we are adding some staff, special ed personnel.
Yes,
right?
we are.
And also some administrative personnel that work with the students, right? Could you explain where we're at?
So sure. We are in the area of special education, increasing our special education budget, but at the same time, we are bringing children back who are out of district, and the savings that we have by bringing those children back will pay for the number of new staffing that we have coming to the district.
Mm-hmm.
So while we're bringing actually that 8 special education teachers, I believe, into the district, we really don't have any significant increase in terms of funding for those people because of the offset of students being out of district and the transportation cost that goes along with that. In terms of administrative staffing, we're not increasing our administrative staffing. So we're really stable in that area.
So now there's also a proposition on the ballot. Tell us about it.
So the proposition is about a capital reserve fund, which I'm very, very pleased that Fred, in using his creativity and his knowledge, thinks it's a good idea for our district. And I think Fred perhaps should give some of those details and explain exactly how it's going to benefit our school district.
So, John, what we're looking to do is ask the voters to authorize the district to set up a capital reserve fund. So there's no dollars going into it as part of this budget. It's just the authorization to set it up. It's going to have a 10-year life to it, and it's going to have a maximum or ultimate balance of no more than $25 million. But the purpose for it is to begin to set aside dollars when they might become available to set up almost savings and planning for the future for our next capital project. Just like on your home, you want to plan ahead for replacing a roof or a furnace. This is the district doing some long-term planning to set aside some dollars for some future capital projects. And you know, with the number of buildings that we have, the age of the buildings, there's always roofs and windows and boilers and items that need to be repaired. So in a couple of years, we'll be looking at our next capital project, and hopefully we'll begin to set aside some funding that will provide a way to reduce the long-term borrowing cost or a potential tax increase for our taxpayers here in White Plains.
Where will these funds come from?
Two areas primarily. First of all, with our $200 million plus budget, we manage it very carefully, very frugally, and we don't ever want to be in a deficit situation. So every year there's always a little bit left over. So that would be one of the plans, is to take some of that little bit leftover money and begin to set it aside in this capital reserve for a future capital project. The other item that's important is we do have other reserves out there that we've set up over the years. And if at some point we want to move some money from one reserve to the other, the board has that ability to do that. That might help address that.
So at this point, you really don't visualize of a portion of a tax increase or a budget.
Don't have that planned in this year's budget.
But could
not necessarily. Potentially, that's one approach that some districts might do, is begin to set aside a little bit of money in some of the years, but that's not been any discussion at this point.
When is this money needed?
Well, it's been our pattern in White Plains. About every 6 years, we come to our community with the next project to maintain our facilities. The last project was approved in 2012, and we're pretty close to finishing that up. Most of the work in East View. So realistically, the next project probably would be coming before the voters in 2018, somewhere around in there, with the work beginning in 2019 or 20. So the money's going to probably be needed in about 5 years here. So
I see. Now, does the capital reserve count towards your annual levy increase, or is that separate, like some of the other items that are not counted towards?
So in doing the property tax cap calculation, one of the exclusions is what's called capital project debt or financing and so forth. So this is exempt from that calculation. But the good part here, if we're not adding significant additional debt, that's going to keep the tax rate down for our taxpayers in the future there.
Sure, just like if you, in your own budget at home, if you know that coming up in the future you may have to replace your roof, and you can begin to put aside some of your own money to do that, then when it comes time, you may be having to borrow less, with interest, of course, attached to it. So it's a win-win situation. If we can put money that we're able to save toward a future capital project, then there's less need to go out and borrow perhaps a large bond in order to do that.
I see. So do you see this reserve being increased eventually?
Well,
past the 24 million mark.
Well, it's 25 million.
25.
So no, we're very comfortable with this figure right now, and again, looking at that savings, hopefully we can put money into that over the next several years, and when it comes time to actually do the capital projects, we do need permission at that point from the taxpayers in order to spend it on the capital project. So the board or we cannot just go out there and say.
So it have to be a vote.
Yes, they have to vote in order to spend that money. In the same way as we would have to if we go out for a bond.
So generally, the capital reserve is not going to cost any increase in taxes.
Correct. Correct.
At least at this time.
And we don't anticipate that it will. No.
Where is that money coming from? Less money paid out in certiorars, for example?
That's certainly one area that, as we've seen the last year or two, there's been a little bit of reduction in that amount, which means as the district has tried to establish reserves for some of that, the need for that now is going to be minimized in the future. So this will give us the ability to put some of those dollars in the capital reserve.
Well, that's an intelligent question from a reporter. That's make out of that. Okay, so that is interesting. Now, Mr. Seiler, you have crafted two of our highest tax increases when you first got here. Then you adjusted to the lowest increases required by the tax cap. And what do you see as you depart will be the most difficult adjustments White Plains has to make in the budget?
I think one of the challenges always in budgeting is to look beyond the current year. And I think with our Board of Education and our Finance Committee, we've begun to really create a process where we do a 5-year long-range plan. We begin to look at where things are going to be, not just next year, but down the road there. So I think the challenge will be is to maintain that long-term thinking there. Because often it's very easy when things get a little tight to say, well, let's do some real short-term solutions. And when you do that, that begins to catch up to you. So I think that'll be the challenge going forward, is always trying to maintain that long-term level planning for the future there.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's see, the teacher's contract is settled for how many years?
So it's settled for 1 more year.
1 more year.
And so next year we'll begin a negotiating process with our Teachers Association.
I see. Is there any your thoughts at this time as to how that's going to be treated?
Well, it's going to be treated professionally and
Yes,
respectfully,
of course.
and have positive conversations about the future. I think we all understand, again, that the tax cap puts us in a particular place, and that we need to be mindful of doing what's best for our children, for our staff members, and for the community.
No indication that the tax cap is going to be done away with at this time.
I haven't heard that. I've heard a little conversation. I've heard a little conversation that perhaps the state could decide to move it to an actual 2%, as is in the case in some other neighboring states. Right now, people hear that word 2% and think that's where it is. But of course, as we know, it really is more dependent on the other
Inflation.
factors,
Yes.
the inflation rate and so on surrounding that.
Yeah. Now, on Monday evening this week, we have selected a successor to Mr. Seiler, Anne Teisch. Fred, Dr. Fee, could you tell us a little bit about what she brings to White Plains?
Sure, I can comment a little bit, and I know that
sure.
Fred has worked with her professionally and at meetings and so on. So Anne Teisch comes to us with 15 years experience in South Orange Town in Rockland County as a school business administrator there, as well as their deputy superintendent. So she brings a great deal of expertise to us as she arrives here. She also, prior to that, served for a local CPA firm as one of their audit managers, so has a lot of experience in the private sector in terms of audits and other financial kinds of responsibilities. So we think she brings a welcome addition to our district, and certainly has big shoes to fill. Fred has done such a great job. But I think we've hired someone with the necessary experience, maturity, background, and so on to serve our district well.
Do you think she will bring her cost-cutting expertise to the district?
Absolutely. She will do the right thing for our students, and she has kept South Orange Town in very good shape, and we have no doubt that she'll continue to do the same for us.
Yeah. Now, you gave a report, I think, just Monday night, upon what you had discovered on the dual language presentations to the school district community. Could you summarize what you get as the sense of the community on how White Plains should adjust to the state demand that we provide bilingual education in some form for new English language learners? It's a long question, but I want.
Sure. Well, I think we as a school district have the responsibility to serve all of our children well. The State Education Department, I believe, has the same responsibility, and recently they've made a change in Commissioner's Regulation Part 154 to ask school districts to be looking at bilingual education as a more effective vehicle, perhaps, than simply English as a new language, ENL, for districts. Our district has used dual language as our bilingual program for the last 9 years. And as I arrived on July 1st, I was faced with the responsibility of looking to see how we might expand that program. So I created a task force, and after that task force finished its work, we couldn't figure out, at that moment, the best vehicle for expansion. So then I organized 3 town meetings, which have now all been completed, as well as visits to 8 of our schools in the district to speak to faculty and staff about their impressions. Through it all, there's been kind of mixed opinions about the best way to expand the program, whether it be to an academy model or expanding from our 2 schools that house the program now to a 3rd, and eventually maybe even a 4th or a 5th. And then there's been a lot of opinions expressed about whether or not dual language is the correct model for us. I believe it is. There's a lot of research about that, saying it is the most effective model for English language learners, and it has the other advantage of having English proficient children become bilingual as they learn Spanish. So I think we as a district are committed to that. And in the next several months, whether it's the spring this year or into the fall of next year, I'll be making a recommendation to the board about the opportunities for expansion.
I see. How much more staffing will be needed for dual language, and any idea of what it will cost us?
So at the moment, we don't need any additional staffing for dual language. It's the same number of classroom teachers, but of course the teacher in the paired model that we use, one of those 2 teachers has to in fact be bilingual, speak English and Spanish, but there's no additional cost. Now ultimately, as in any of our programs, if we believe new resources are important to help serve our children, there could be some staffing implications. But as we expand this program right now, we don't see any new costs involved.
Go ahead.
Now, we did decide to bring an additional instructional coach to our district. We have instructional coaches in each of our elementary schools. They support our teachers in terms of instructional practice and curriculum development. And we're bringing now 1 additional instructional coach to our district to focus on our dual language program. So that person will work between our 2 schools to help ensure both the quality of the program and consistency between the 2 schools. And as we consider expansion for September of 2017, not this coming September, a whole year away, September of 2017, that instructional coach will also be responsible for supporting that expansion.
Mm-hmm. Now, ultimately, as this expands with each new kindergarten class in each of the new schools, what is the personnel number of increase that we're talking about?
Again, no increase. So for example, if we bring the program to a 3rd school, it would begin only in kindergarten in that 3rd school in September 2017. When those children now move to 1st grade, again, there's no increase in staffing. There's still 5 sections of 1st grade, except one of those teachers among those 5 sections needs to be bilingual.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's the dual language class.
Yes.
Yeah.
So as we continue to hire based on people's retirements and attrition, people leaving the district, certainly we want to be considering hiring bilingual teachers. So as our children move up in the grades, those teachers are available.
Right.
But the 5 classes remain the 5 classes. There's no additional teachers being hired.
Right. Now, we've also, another budget matter is the solar project that has now started. And Fred, could you tell us where that is going? What is it going to save us? And when will the savings kick in?
Okay, so the project was approved by our Board of Education in January. So at this point, it involves 5 of our school buildings, in which we've got relatively new roofs on. This will be a roof solar project. At this point, we've done a lot of the engineering type work, some of the studies that need to be completed. Last night, our Board of Education approved the environmental assessment requirement there. And at this point, it's ready in a couple weeks to be presented to NYSERDA, which has been directed by the state to be the approving group for this project. And our hope is that sometime this summer, we'll begin to work to put the solar panels on our particular buildings. Of course, once they're in and activated, which we hope to occur before December 31st, we'll begin to generate some savings. Not a significant amount. We're estimating about $20,000 to $25,000 a year across the district. More importantly, I think we're making a good positive step forward in addressing environmental concerns and a carbon footprint there.
So does that give you more money, say, to contribute to, say, the capital reserve?
Or to academic programs for students.
That's true. The academic program. What is it costing us to install this?
There's no cost in doing this here. It's being provided as part of the long-term lease agreement. So there's no dollar cost for the district. We will then get some savings in the utility cost there that will come back to the district, saving us about $20,000 to $25,000 a year, and that was pretty conservatively projected.
Okay. Now, we have just had the school assessments, Dr. Fred, the ELA and the math across all the grades, and I was wondering if you have any feedback from the faculty on the new assessments in English and math. Are they harder? Are there less complaints? How did the new test company do?
Okay, so of course the assessments are in grades 3 through 8. So it affects our 5 elementary schools, Eastview and Highlands, in both ELA and math. The biggest change, I think, for our teachers and for our administrators in those schools was the fact that the test was untimed. So very often children, because of particular learning needs, may have what's called time and a half or unlimited time in order to take their assessments, but this was the case now for every child. Every child could take as long as they wanted, had to be within the school day, but as opposed to an hour and a half or 2 hours where the test might have been before, children could take their time and do it and in most cases, children finished in a timely fashion. They didn't have to extend their time very long. But in a couple of cases, children chose to take their time and do it longer. So we learned, of course, from the experience. In terms of the complexity of the tests, how difficult they were, there really weren't any comments about that. I think we thought that they were fairly similar to other tests. I think, though, that the state, going forward, is going to be making some decisions about adjusting some of those kinds of things. Because, once again, right now, those assessments are no longer being used in terms of teacher performance, where they were tied to them before. So I think there's still a lot of work for the state to do on those assessments before they get, once again, tied to district and teacher performance.
Well, when the results come out in June, the State Education Department promises us the results of the assessments. How will Dr. Freed be looking at them? How are you going to make sense out of them?
Sure.
What will they be used for?
Yeah. So in every district I've been in, when assessment results have come out, we look at them very carefully. I look at them both with our central office cabinet members as well as with principals to see how our children are performing. And as we can try to figure out particular areas of need or deficit, we certainly want to make adjustments as we look forward to the following school year in those kinds of ways.
Yeah, what are you looking for? What do you look for?
Well, I'm always looking for our students to perform well on those assessments as well as classroom assessments and so on. We do understand that there are challenges, particularly with these state assessments, having to do with the fact that we have a lot of children who are English language learners, and as they are learning their academic English over time, it's taking them a while to adjust and to be in the ready to perform well. So we certainly look at a lot of factors having to do with our diversity, having to do with our curriculum, and so on.
So you're you will be looking at them seriously as being a good measurement.
Being a measurement.
A better one.
A measurement, right? I mean, the best way to measure anyone's progress, students, adults like us, and so on, is by the use of multiple measures, right? Not relying on one measure to tell us the whole story. So this is one. And we, of course, have measures within our classrooms that we use as well to help gauge a child's progress.
There's obviously been a disconnect between what we measure and what the assessments have measured over the last 3 or 4 years.
Absolutely,
So
in all
how
school
do we-
districts.
How do we reconcile that?
Yeah, well, it's difficult. I mean, we continue, I belong to a superintendent's organization, of course, the Lower Hudson Council of School Superintendents, and we had many conversations with our local legislators, with the regents, with officials in Albany, about looking at assessments differently, because we don't believe that looking at just one assessment is going to provide us with the information or the value necessary to understand how our students are performing.
Okay, now we're coming towards the end of the program. So right now, Fred, why don't you tell us what they have to do on the budget day? Budget vote.
Well, I think everyone needs to remember that the third Tuesday, May 17th, is the date in which we have the election of Board of Education candidates, and on the school budget on a capital reserve. The polling sites are open between 12 noon and 9 p.m. So pretty much the same sites you've voted in the past there, and we really encourage you to come out and vote.
Right. And again, the capital project issue is very important, because if you're going to do that, they have to approve it.
Correct.
Right. So now, Mr. Seiler, you've been a really great source for the information on the district the last 10 years. It's been a pleasure working with you. And tell us about your future plans.
I'm going to enjoy retirement, spend some time with my kids and grandkids, spend winter in Florida, and probably get into some of my hobbies. But it's been great working in White Plains. It's been a wonderful experience.
Well, it's been great working with you too. Now, Dr. Fried, is there anything you would like to say to the school district parents and regular citizens?
Well, I just hope, again, as Fred mentioned, that you come out on May 17th and vote. Of course, it's your right to vote, and we hope people, of course, come out to vote. And again, I just want to thank Fred for his years of dedication here and his support for me as I entered here in my first year as a superintendent. So I appreciate that a great deal.
Dr. Paul Fried, Superintendent of Schools in White Plains, and Fred Seiler, Assistant Superintendent for Business, you have been heard. This is John Bailey saying good night for people to be heard.